Hey guys, today is about myths all around breeding. As you know, breeding is somewhat of our topic here on the channel, and because it is, and because I have those tutorials online that you maybe know, I get a lot of questions about breeding mechanics and game mechanics that people think I might have forgotten or never heard of. And most of the time I have never talked about those mechanics is because they don't really exist. There are a lot of myths and rumors around breeding, and you probably know a few yourself. But I also thought it is the perfect opportunity to make a little Mythbuster video and to check out all those myths and see how true are they and how false are they. And I have handpicked your probably most asked questions or your most upbrought myths and rumors that I have seen in my comments in the past months when it came to breeding. But before we jump into the myths, make sure you have subscribed to this channel and give this video a thumbs up if you like content like this. But let's go into the first rumor or myth, and that is that gacha parents feed their babies. I get asked quite a lot how to raise gacha babies. And the rumor that gacha parents actually feed their babies is something that exists since day one. And the idea behind this rumor is that the gacha acts a little bit like the Mewing does now. But the thing is, the game mechanic that an animal can act as a feeding trough was just implemented with the Mewing, so the gacha does not do this. But how do gacha babies eat? Well, the short answer is they don't. They just regenerate food every few seconds. The parents are not involved in this, and we tested this in the dev kit. But why do gacha babies still die and starve? The regeneration of stats, and here is also food involved, is dependent on three different things. First, the server has to be fairly stable and not too many freezes. Second, the inventory of the gacha has to be completely empty. And third, the gacha has to be rendered by a player. As soon as the player leaves the render of the baby will go into stasis. And the stasis is a mechanic that saves server resources by deactivating some functions that the animals have, because those resources are needed where players actually actively play. You can see that, for example, if you have a dino baby that you let grow overnight, and when you log in, the dino baby is completely bloody, but it did not get damaged or anything, and it grew up perfectly fine. It just didn't regenerate its health. It's because the baby was not rendered in when it grew up, so the health was staying at the same spot as it was when you logged out. And while regenerating food from a feeding trough or its own inventory is lowered in stasis, but it's not deactivated, babies will be fine when you log out. But the gacha is different because there is neither a feeding trough nor an inventory involved into its regenerating its food value. Therefore, the gacha will not regenerate food and will slowly starve. There are several workarounds to prevent this from happening. The most obvious one is, of course, not leaving the gacha baby and staying in render until it's grown. But sometimes you want to actively play and not just stare on your gacha babies. So one thing you can do if you play on a modded server is using a hitching post from S+ or one of the forks of S+, because once a dino is tied to the hitching post, it will stay rendered. Some people also use a dino leash and leave the baby on wander, so it will pick up items around it and will feed itself. This is a little bit too risky for me personally, so one thing that I learned works pretty well is if you have to leave the base for a specific amount of time, then you can just put it close or into the basket of a Mewing. Make sure the Mewing is slot capped with food. I would suggest using meat because meat has a higher value. And then you can leave the base and leave the gacha to itself for a limited amount of time. But I would be careful. I would always check the Mewing if it still has enough food. But short, the parents are not involved in raising the baby. The parents do not matter for raising the baby. The next myth is about the 450 level cap, or rather the 500 level cap, and that it is on every server. After I made my breeding guide, many of you came to me and said that the level cap is 450 or 500, and therefore my numbers are wrong. I did make a video after this where I explained to you the difference between the official and the unofficial servers. But since I get these comments once in a while, I try to explain it to you again. The level cap that you have on official servers is not a standard setting, but it's an individual change that has been done only for the official servers. So if you set up a server, a fresh server today, then the only level cap you have is 255 points per stat on a dino. And if you combine those 255 points per stat, that is your level cap. But the 450 or the 500 are artificial caps that are hard-coded on the official servers to prevent stuff being too OP and to guarantee a specific kind of balancing. And if you ever had a level 1600 giga and ran through a server with a max dino level from 150, you know what I mean with balancing. So level 450 or 500 is an official server thing. It's not a vanilla game thing. If you set up a server yourself, you will not have this cap. Now talking about the next myth, and that is that the mutation chance changes with every mutation. Some people from the community came to me and asked, how does the mutation chance work? And even though I'm going to make a new video in the future, in the near future even, I want to explain to you the mutation chances very shortly so you get this question answered. There are in total 3 scenarios that can happen and that decide over the mutation chance. The first scenario is that both of your parents are below 20 mutations, and then you have a 7.3% chance to get a mutation. The second scenario is that one parent is capped, so it's over 20 mutations, and then the mutation chance is reduced by a little bit less than half from those 7.3%. And then we have the third scenario, and this is when both parents are over 20 mutations, and that means your mutation chance is 0. And those are numbers that are in the game code. So they are not just guessed, they are in the game code. So it doesn't matter if you have 2 mutations and you want to get to 3 mutations, or if you have 18 mutations and you want to get to 19. The odds to get the mutation are the same in both cases. So to see what your chances are, just check those 3 scenarios and check which one fits to you, and then you know your mutation chance. There is a rule of thumb with these kind of rumors that try to make breeding sound more and more complicated than it actually is, even though breeding is not the easiest mechanic in the game. But every time people try to make the code sound super overcomplicated and changing with every single case that can happen, then it's usually not true. I don't want to say the code is simple, but the code is definitely not as complicated as people may think it is. And let's get to the next rumor, and that is if you want to combine stats of animals, it is easier to combine them when the stats are closer together. Especially when we're talking about breeding with level 1 females, because they are easy and cheap to clone. I often hear that it's very complicated to combine and to mutate stats when one of the parent has a very low stat. Some even say that the game is preferring the lower stat when the difference between the 2 stats is too high. And that's not true. And I can show you this with these 3 examples that I put in the ARK Smart Breeder. And you can see that in all 3 cases, the difference between the stats of the both parents got bigger and bigger. But you can also see that the curve that decides over the possibility how the stats are spread on the baby are the same. And here you can also see, if you cut it into half, that the game does favor the better stat over the worse stat. And the code does not say anything else but check the both stats, and if one is higher, then it has a 55% chance to be given to the baby. The code does not care about how big the difference of the both stats is, it just looks for the higher stat and the lower stat. So you can perfectly fine breed with level 1 females. You're not blocking yourself out here. Another very popular rumor is that you can have unlimited mutations, especially in the combination with people saying there is the 450 level cap for all servers, saying there are unlimited mutations is just as popular as a rumor. But even if you play on private servers, there is not such a thing as unlimited mutations. And here we have to differentiate between mutations and the mutation counter, because both are not the same. I'm talking about real mutations, which make stats rise. Since you have the cap for 255 points as a base stat per stat, you cannot mutate further than that, and therefore you can calculate your maximum level per animal and therefore also your maximum amount of mutations you can get. The formula for the max level of non-flyers is 7 times 255 plus 1, because 1 is how the dinos start. A level 1 dino has 0 points in any stat, so you always have to put the plus 1 at the end. For flyers, you have 6 times 255 plus 1, because they don't have and never get points into movement speed, therefore they have 1 stat less. But let's do a quick math and find out how many mutations can we get. If we take 7 times 255, we are at 1785, and that's the maximum amount of level points a non-flyer can have. And in order to find out how many mutations that are, we have to divide that number by 2. Because you get 2 points per mutation. And there we are at 892.5. And if we round it down, because we cannot get a half mutation, we are at 892 mutations, going from a level 1 animal to a full capped animal. But realistically, we collect stats and then combine the stats in order to start breeding. So let's assume we have an animal that has level 300, therefore 299 stat points. Then we are at 1785 minus 299, and then divide this by 2, and here we are at 743 mutations. And that's quite a lot still, but we are talking about a completely fully capped animal. Those numbers are high, but they are far away from being infinite. So infinite mutations are not a thing. And how about we talk about my favorite myth of them all, and that is unicorns raise your chance for mutation or the chance of twins and triplets. And that's a classic. That is really a classic. Under every single of my breeding videos, even in the Twitch chat, I often hear, do unicorns raise the chance for mutations, twins or triplets? And the answer is no. The unicorn is just a simple reskin of the equus. It is just a wild horse. The same way an aberrant equus exists and is just its own variant, the same way about the unicorn is just a new variant of the wild horse. And it has the same functions, and it does not have any more functions. It just works the same as a horse. And if you do not believe it from myself, here is a tweet where Cedric says the same. Cedric is the community manager of Wildcard, which is the studio that made ARK. So he says, no, there is no dino in ARK that has the ability to affect the chances of mutations, twins, triplets, etc. I just confirmed this with design and Q&A. So please leave unicorns alone. Please don't put them under pressure if your mutations are not happening. They don't deserve this pressure. But those were the most common breeding myths that were brought to me by you. And I really hope we now have a lot of answers to the questions that were bugging us for a long, long time. If you know more myths, then let me know in the comments, and then we can maybe go for ARK Mythbuster 2.0. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video and you could take something out of the video for you. And I hope to see you in the next video. See you next time. Bye!